Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now the other day I purchased two cheap eBay PCs, both with very different specs. The cheapest of the two cost £36 and came with an i5 2500K, 16 gigs of DDR3 memory and a GTX 560 graphics card. These components were all wrapped up within an old Antec 300 case and powered by a 730 watt Be Quiet PSU. As expected, there was room for improvement as far as gaming was concerned, so today I want to talk about what I've changed to try and squeeze more from this old Sandy Bridge build. Surprisingly, the case was pretty clean, but I removed all the components and side panels before giving it a blast with the electric duster, as well as a wipe with a microfiber cloth. There are a few marks and scratches, but it's clear that this custom PC has been well looked after over the last decade and a half. To me, the Antec 300 is the epitome of subtle yet stylish. While the motherboard was out of the system, I took the opportunity to give this a bit of a clean up too. A soft makeup brush will do, and luckily my sister had one to spare. Just like the case, this didn't require much of a clean. I also gave the two 8GB Corsair RAM modules a quick dust, and these will be staying in the system. We have 16GB clocked at 1866MHz total, but I found that this isn't actually a stable speed in this board. The highest I could go was 1600MHz. Not a big deal, the gaming differences will be negligible, but worth mentioning in the interest of honesty. A couple of videos ago I found that the stock cooler could actually handle a CPU overclock, but a decent aftermarket offering doesn't have to be expensive and will allow us to push the chip further. The Thermalright Assassin King 120 SE costs less than £16 on Amazon right now and is ideal for the job. A couple of brackets and a few screws later, it was good to go. The PSU is a Be Quiet BQT 730 watt, and although it's quite old, it was pretty well rated at the time and still works perfectly. Condition wise, it's got a couple of marks and scratches as expected, but after blowing the thin layer of dust off of it, I stuck it back in the system. It's a shame it didn't come with more cables, but I'm not going to complain considering it came as part of a £36 PC. For less than £11 I got three Thermalright fans, brand new on Amazon. The case has space for two at the rear and the top. It turns out the top space is for a 140mm fan, but we can still make 120mm fit. I bought these to replace the rear Molex powered fan, which probably works just fine, but we have no Molex power connector, and the fan itself doesn't have a 3 or 4 pin header connector. The graphics card was next, and because we're using an old i5, I didn't need anything fancy. My local CEX had this 4GB RX 580 for £65 with a 2-year warranty. 8GB cards don't cost much more, to be honest, but we're going to be CPU limited in most scenarios anyway, and after selling the GTX 560 for £15, this only owes me 50 quid. I'd still recommend getting an 8GB card if you can though, to be fair. Now in total, this part retro, part modern machine cost me £133.92 altogether. I think I could certainly do better for the same cost, but this one wasn't really about the money for me. It was about giving an old i5 2500K machine a new lease of life, even if it's best suited to older or less demanding games. Swapping out the CPU for, say, an i7 at some point too, because that would definitely benefit our machine here. This is all about focusing on the legendary 2500K though, and the first thing I did after boot up was jump into the BIOS and change the clock frequency to 4.5 GHz. This chip has no problem with this, and the system has been running for hours at this clock speed at the time of editing. Now the RX 580 will run in PCIe 2.0 mode because of the old CPU, but at least it's running in full X16 mode, so performance shouldn't be impacted too much. Let's see what this combo can do. Now hopefully our percentile lows don't suffer all that badly. I don't dispute that the 2500K is past its golden years for sure, but it's not entirely useless. That said, it's always important to manage your expectations with an older and now very cheap quad-core CPU. So first of all we have Fallout 4, which at 1080p with a high preset and TAA with the default cap in place. In this case, it was running at 75 FPS max because of my monitor, which is 75 Hz. That being said, we did see a maximum frame rate of 76, which was clever, but overall and on average we saw 73 with a 1% low of 52 and a 0.1% low of 37. If you're looking to get back into Fallout 4, this is a perfect system for the job. In Counter-Strike 2, 1080p with the low preset and FSR off, well, this is just a compilation of me getting wiped out, to be honest, but overall, the performance was not too bad at all with 122 frames per second, which is surprising considering the processor. The overclock, I think, is definitely helping here. The 1% low was 61 and the 0.1% low was 14, which does indicate a few dips and drops. The Witcher 3 next gen. We are using DX11 mode instead of DX12, so I'm not sure how many of those next gen effects we are getting. That said, performance is definitely better like this, and at 1080p with the high settings and TAAU, we saw 59 FPS on average. Quite annoying that we didn't quite hit 60 overall, but you will see higher than that in some instances. This one's very CPU intensive, so in and around busier cities and towns, you're going to see some pretty heavy dips, as is demonstrated by our percentile figures here. GTA 5 is another perfect example of a game that runs really well on this configuration. I don't doubt that the CPU is still holding us back, and as I said before, an i7 would certainly benefit this machine, and we'll be doing that at some point, but this was all about showcasing the 2500K in all its glory. 97 FPS overall means that this game still runs very well, with a 1% low of 72 and a 0.1% low of 52, so no complaints from me here. Red Dead Redemption 2 also surprised me. The textures were set to ultra, everything else was set to low, geometry LOD was set to max, grass LOD was set to 2 out of 10 and TAA was set to medium. Now we saw a very nice 55 FPS on average, which again was another surprising result. Those percentile lows weren't that bad either, considering, and I could happily play Red Dead on this machine, which I wasn't expecting to say at all, to be honest. Games like Cyberpunk are probably best left alone. 1080p with the lowest settings here and FSR performance for an average of 47 FPS. Don't get me wrong, I think it was pretty playable in some instances, in some areas of the map, and if you wanted to turn FSR off for a plus 30 FPS average, you could still do that. There's no getting around the fact that we will see dips and drops here and there though, because of the processor in the PC. Finally, we have Fortnite, another example of a game that works fairly well on this machine. Medium preset TAA with 100% 3D res for an average of 77. That said, it's going to be pretty harsh in terms of those frame dips and drops, though after a few minutes the gameplay does smooth out slightly. Now I've got to be honest, I've said it before, an upgrade to an i7 instead would work wonders here. It's going to be a lot better. Those 4 extra threads will work wonders in some games, but this was all about showcasing the 2500K, and I think we've restored this somewhat to its former glory with a bit more of a modern twist. When the CPU is overclocked, it certainly helps it out in some situations, that's for sure, and I'm pretty pleased with some of the results. I'll be keeping this for a while because I'll be upgrading the CPU very soon, and we'll be having a cheap CPU comparison in 2024, but until then, thanks for watching, leave your thoughts down below, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.